topic piece.
We're recording now.
All right. Well, good evening and welcome to our third session. It is backyard composting. And Carrie and I are very excited about the continuation of this workshop series. And we're not getting quite the good sunshine that we would like to have today to really talk about and get everybody enthused about backyard composting. But hopefully this workshop will answer some of your questions and help you get some inspiration further down the road. Again, my name is Lindsay Grimm. I'm the recycling director here at Morrow County Recycling. Keep Morrow County beautiful. We are funded through the Solid Waste District, and in these workshop series, a portion of what we can do is provided through the Solid Waste District. So that is a big piece from where I am, and Carrie is with Extension Office.
Yes, like Lindsay said, I'm the Ag and Natural Resources educator, and Lindsay and I have had a lot of fun partnering on this project and sharing it with everybody. Our goal was to have it in person, but that didn't happen, so we've just carried through with our Zoom meetings, and we have 2 more after this one in July and 1 in August. So we'll post them again on Facebook and send out emails so everybody can tune into those. So with that, Lindsay, go ahead and take it away.
Sounds good. You'll have to, there we go.
There we go.
All right, just as a quick recap of, why we're actually encouraged about composting, it's that black gold that we're all looking for. It improves plant health, reduces soil erosion, allows soil to retain more water, enhances soil fertility. Big piece from my side of things is it reduces waste from the landfill and items that are being burnt. And that is a huge portion of how my department is actually funded. So outside of grant funds, our funding from the Solid Waste District is based off of diversion from the landfill. And with as we learned in the vermicomposting, about half of our food is wasted in the United States. And so that is a big piece. And then a lot of our yard waste is burnt. And so that is also a piece that can be composted, and those compost numbers help offset landfill numbers. Composting is a benefit to the soil structure. It allows us to retain some more nutrients. It helps with the carbon to reduce the climate impact. It also builds community resilience and power, and is something that everyone can do. So you don't have to be a master gardener. You don't have to be an expert. Even I can compost, and that's a pretty good adventure for me. So that is just a recap. Again, composting, if you want to flip to the next page. Composting is a dark, crumbly, earth-smelling material produced by natural decomposition of organic materials. It is not a soil. Click. Sorry. It is not a soil. The bacteria, since Zoom updated all of their lovely features, we have some challenges of not being able to share the computer screen. So Carrie's actually running computer. So bacteria, fungi, and microbes feed on that organic matter to decompose all of the material. The microbes help use the carbon and nitrogen to reproduce. And it takes several cycles of organisms to actually make that complete compost, or the black gold. So those are a little bit of that. During the, so what are my options for backyard composting? You're good. You have lots of options. When we talked originally in our 101, these are a few items that we talked: a compost pile, compost bins, tumblers, layers, trench composting, and believe it or not, you can make your own design of composting and method. I do have to say that the backyard composting lends itself to better composting of larger material, of organic material. So you are able to compost leaves and brushy material like twigs and sticks and some of those things. You could possibly even throw a log in there, but it would take a while to decompose. But and you can do some food scraps in there as well, as long as you kind of play with some caution with that. So our open compost pile or heap it's just that. It's a big pile. It has no real boundaries to it. You're really building that structure up higher, and you're layering your material kind of like a lasagna. So you're putting a layer of brown carbons on the bottom. That layer really needs to be about 3 to 4 inches. That gives you a good foundation and base. It also allows for that air circulation, something that is going to be much needed to get some heat into your compost pile and allow the magic in your compost pile to actually happen. After those 3 to 4 inches of brown, you're going to start adding your green nitrogen material. So that's your scraps, your leaves, your food items. And this is the material that is your nitrogens. And it does need to be a little damp. So the challenge with that we're finding, or that you're going to have to play around with backyard composting, is now we need to figure out how to keep some moisture on our compost pile. The moisture, we'll talk a little bit more, but it needs to be like a sponge dampness. And then you'll add another layer of your browns, and then greens and browns and greens, until you kind of get this layering piece, and it eventually will do its thing. You have anything to add on that?
No, I don't.
Okay. If you're more OCD and you need some more structure to your compost piles, there are some options for you that you can do DIYs. They're pretty inexpensive. The pallet system, you can set up some bays there, and with the pallets you can do it as the same as a just an open compost pile, or you can use it as a system. You can fill one and then eventually flip it over to the other to help speed up the process, or you can do some cold composting in there as well and just use them as silos. The GeoBin is kind of a plastic, it's a plastic outline that helps you fill it with leaves. And this is a really good option to even have as a stockpile for leaves. So in the fall, you're always going to need decaying leaves in an compost bin or a backyard compost bin, because that is going to be your big source of your browns. And so the GeoBin is a great option for that. You can also do it with a trash can or even wire composting. But one of the things that you'll have to learn how to do is kind of stockpile your browns in your leaves. If you don't really like that idea and you don't have any open green space, you can do the next bin, and that is a vessel, or an in-vessel bin. And
Are we here, Lindsay? Is this where you want to be?
Yep.
Okay.
And those are tumblers. They are, you can put those even on your back porch. And because the composting is happening inside of the bin. Some of them you will want to make sure that you're reading the goods and the bads about the bins, because some of them do get heavy because they require a physical turning of the bins to keep them hot and active. And the one in the middle with a hand crank is going to possibly get heavier than the one that tumbles by itself off to the right hand side. The left one is a dual chamber. And it's supposed to be designed so that you can have, you know, you're doing one and then you're letting it cook for say while you're starting the next one. But you have to think about you're reducing your capacity. You have 2 batches of material. So a lot of these options are up to your taste. The next one is a layered system, but with it's another in vessel. It's a layered system. This one's a good one for if you're aging, actually. So it's kind of like a layered system within a box, and it's designed so that you're pulling material off the bottom. They kind of snap together so that when the material is finally ready for harvesting, that they kind of come apart, and then you now have access to that pile. You would cut basically the top half or the top quarter off and move it to a new spot and rebuild your box, and then that would become the bottom inoculant chamber of the layering system. And this one again is fairly friendly. It's black, it heats up nicely, supposedly. I have not actually utilized this bin, but I have read some good comments about it. The trenching and composting option it's really an easy way to incorporate compost into a garden or a flower bed. If you click it one more time, there is a new option, is pocket composting. Instead of building the trench and having it all the way down and then, you know, allowing that to compost, you can actually add just small holes in next to your flower beds, or if you have bushes or any kind of landscaping type of those things, you can add just dig a hole, put your food compost in. The worms are actually attracted to this, and so it allows for the material to decompose. Adding that compost, it's adding lots of drainage and aeration to your system, and it's adding that piece without really you having to do much. So the trench or the pocket composting is kind of a new idea to composting. So where in the world do I put my compost bin? So again, it depends on what kind of compost system is best for you and what you're looking for. But the number one thing that you need to take into consideration is that it needs to be convenient. You are going to be using your bin a lot. You will be adding to it, you'll be turning it, you'll be removing the compost, and it really does need to be easily accessible, and you don't want to have to go, you know, trek to the back 40 just to get your compost. You'll never use it. The other pieces that you need to look for is a spot with some good drainage. We need some moisture, but we don't need it to be swimming. It does need to have you need to think about a convenient plan if you're going to incorporate some food scraps, how to get your food scraps to the bin. And then the other thing is that your bin needs to be, or your compost pile needs to be at least 3 feet clearance from any wooden structures or foundation structures. So composting is a rotting process, and you don't want that to impede in any foundations. The other thing with like a wood fence is that if it's right up against the fence, then it allows and attracts more rodents and critters. And so that creates lots of other challenges because they love that clutter, they love the hiding spaces, and it just creates some extra obstacles for you that you're not going to want down the road. The little compost pail in the center is just an option. You can get a bucket or anything, honestly. This has a lid to it. They're fairly inexpensive, but it is a way that you can carry your food scraps from your kitchen out to your bin. The trash can looking thing is an idea where you can even start your food scraps, put a layer of your browns on the bottom, starts with your greens, another layer of your bottom so you can get it started, and then start adding your food scraps. And then before it gets beyond heavy, you can take your trash barrel out and incorporate it into your bin, or into your compost pile, wherever your main compound is. And so there's lots of options and ideas of how to make, kind of like joining your home life into the outside life. And so that's an option, especially if you're trying to figure out on capturing some food compost. If you're only worried about your yard waste and plants and those things, then, obviously you don't have to worry about those things. You can you can make sure that your compost bin location is more convenient for your, whatever you're trying to capture. So that's a piece. The other things that you need to consider is, if you're in a nice neighborhood or something, keeping that view from the front landscape could also be a consideration. Maybe screening it, or if you don't even like the looks of a compost pile, you can screen it. Shady locations are a good way so that you're not having to fight that dry piece as hard, because you do want some moisture in your compost bin, because you're going to want all of those microbes to really work for you and for you and not against you. You'll need a water source, so that's another piece, because it is outside, they will dry out, so you have to have some kind of way to get it some moisture. And the important piece is, again, making sure that it's not directly located next to the structures, that you have 3 feet clearance there. And, just checking to make sure, if you are in town, that it is something that your municipality allows you to do. So even though that you can get a compost bin started, a backyard compost bin started at any time of the year, the time of the year that is the easiest to actually build a compost bin is in the fall. And the reason being is because in the spring, everything is green and lush, and that's adding the nitrogens. And really, we need that offset of that carbon to get our bins or our pile started. We need that 3 to 4 inches of carbon material, or the brown material, as a base layer, again, to add that aeration, add a lot of foundation pieces to our compost bin. And so it is possible to start it at any time of the year, but in the fall, when the leaves are starting to fall and decompose by themselves, that is the easiest time. You'll have to look for other brown types of material, so maybe straw, other types of dead leaves. If you have a wooded area, there's still a lot of dead composted or dead leaves that you can still go gather. That might be an option for you to get started now. So how much effort and labor do I have to put into my composting in my backyard? So this is really, again, up to you. Just as you get to pick which kind of type of compost you want, you can put as much effort into it or as little effort into it. Very passive composting is called cold composting, and extremely active composting is hot composting. So cold composting has really low effort. Little attention is needed. You kind of let nature do its own little thing. It does take a long time, even up to a year or more, and weeds might persist in this. You'll get lots of volunteer plants. You can get some weed pieces, and it just takes a while for those things, because nature is really going to take and do its piece. If you're extremely into composting and want to be very active, the hot composting is for you. More attention, the pile regularly needs turned, adequate volume. You need actually a 1 cubic yard of material to make sure that it is getting that, reaching its temperatures that it's needing. The moisture content needs to be maintained, but you can quickly get some compost ready for you within 3 to 5 months. The optimal temperature for microbial activity is between 130 and 140 degrees. Sometimes you really need to work on getting that a little bit hotter, depending on what kind of material or like what kind of weeds or plant material you're putting in them. If you're composting your tomato seeds, you're gonna have to try to reach a little higher temperature. If it's, you need to kill that, it also needs to reach that 140 and above to kill some pathogens as well.
A little note on that, they do make thermometers, so you can buy thermometers to check your temperature, and Lindsay might mention that a little later. On the weeds, if it's a noxious weed and it has seeds on it, I don't recommend composting it. Just because if it doesn't get that hot and you use that compost, you're going to have a really bad weed problem. So if your weeds are really a noxious, persistent weed, I wouldn't compost it.
Definitely.
Where can you get those thermometers at?
They sell them on Amazon and they sell them at the big box hardware stores.
Definitely. All right, so going on, the fundamentals of composting, we did touch briefly on this in our first one. There are 6 main factors of breaking down the material in the compost, and really in backyard composting, this is the biggest chunk of material that you kind of have to look for. So you really need some heat, you really need some nutrient mix, you need your oxygen, you need your moisture, you need your time, and you need your bugs, your decomposers. All of these things work together to create the micro ecosystem that is ideal for the compost to start breaking down and actually turning your organic material into the compost or the black gold for you to use. So heat is to start with. So again, if you're just cold composting, you're kind of letting your thing to do it. But if you're really doing that hot composting and you're turning and you're really trying to find that sweet spot, it's the thermophilic and the mesophilic stages. So the mesophilic stages, is the ending or the curing stage, and you're gonna reach your active or the thermophilic stage first, or you're going to try to get up there and you're going to try to maintain that high level temperature for 3 to 5 days, straight days. And that's going to help kill your pathogens. It's going to help kill your seeds. It's going to, make that compost really pristine for you and be able to using it without having any challenges in the future. So it takes some work, but by reaching and doing the steps to reach these temperatures, you're going to have a quicker process and you're going to have lots of less troubles. The composting again is reaching a minimum of 130 degrees. The maximum that you can really get is I don't know, but 160 is really where your bacteria and fungi are like kind of, it's starting to get a little hot in here. And your tomatoes need about 155 degrees temperature for those 3 to 5 days to kill those. And that's one of those more of those resistant hardy type seeds. So that's a little bit about that. Again, you can buy a temperature gauge, or you can just stick your hand in there. And if it's pretty hot, then you're doing something good and just keep on going with it. Your nutrient mix is your next piece, and it's just like making a soup. Any good soup, you're adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you're kind of letting it have some time. But in your compost bin, it's the browns and the greens. We talked about a little bit this in the first session. Carbon is your browns and your nitrogens are your greens. The composting microbes need both of them to grow and to reproduce. The nitrogen really helps the grow part and the reproduction, and the carbon provides them the energy that they need. So they really do need both. The carbon piece, or the browns, is your dead stuff, your dead leaves, straw, your paper, wood, sawdust, coconut fibers. But too much browns can really slow down the process because you're pulling that, you're drying it out. Your greens are your grass clippings, kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, manure. Again, this nitrogen rich material, you'll get a sticky wet mess if you get too much. And so again, building that soup or building that nice casserole, you're trying to find that happy, nice mixture. And the next slide will help give you a visual. So rule of thumb to meet that optimal goal of 30 carbon to 1 nitrogen is by doing 1 brown or 1 greens to 3 browns. I think I said that backwards, but 1 green to 3 browns. So if you have a bucket of greens, you're going to want to put 3 buckets of browns in there, or 3 wheelbarrows to 1 green. So whatever the ratio is, it's 3 to 1 to help make sure that you're getting that by volume, to helping make sure that you're kind of meeting or attempting to get that nice mixture.
So it's 3 to 1, Lindsay, not 30 to 1 like your slide says.
Yeah, I am sorry. So just as we've talked before, what goes in my bin, your greens, pretty much any organic material. We do caution you with pet waste and some of those other pieces. Your browns as your decay, your fall leaves, your straw, making sure that it's untreated wood if you are using wood or shavings. Just like some of the other pieces, we do want to caution the cheese and dairy, meat and bones, because they do attract a lot of extra critters that you're not going to want. It also creates some challenges for your microbes. They can be composted, but it's a challenge. It really is. The other things that we need to caution you is, like, you remove your plastics, your plastic stickers, your wax coated papers and metals that are on packaging. We think some of these types of things might be able to compost, but unfortunately they're not. So that's another piece that you just don't want to have to screen all that material back out at the end, because you're not going to want to apply that to your flower beds or your garden, or however you're going to utilize your compost to amend your soil. You can use eggshells. We talked about eggshells not being one of those friendly type of things as friendly for the worms. They are welcome to come into your backyard.
Lindsay, we got a couple questions. Someone said, would you put manure into a cold composting bin?
Manure can definitely be added into one of your layers. And so I would do your brown compost of dry leaves first, and then I would add your green. I would add another layer of that brown, and then add your manure as the 4th layer, because it is going to help speed up your cold compost, because it's adding a lot of more the bugs and stuff that are needed. It's helping enhance that, but it's still going to take a little bit of time, since you're allowing nature to do its own job. But yes, you can use compost, or you can incorporate manure in both cold and hot composting.
Kelsey says, if anyone needs newspapers, let Lindsay know that she has plenty. And then there's a question, can you use burned charcoal ash?
I wouldn't know why you couldn't. It's
My only caution to the charcoal ash is it adds potassium
potassium.
to your garden. And so if you're putting that in your compost and you're putting that on your garden, you could potentially get too much on your garden. I did a soil sample for someone a few years ago and their potassium was through the roof. And I asked them if they were using the charcoal ash, and they were using it from their wood stove. So that can alter your soil. So just, if you're using it, just be careful and use it unlimited amounts.
Right.
Another question, is there any animal waste you should avoid?
So one of the biggest challenges, and we're going to talk about more animal waste at our next session,
Yes.
but one of the biggest ones that a lot of people are having challenges for is pet waste. And there is some newer composting studies out there of how to start composting those types of waste, but it's one of those challenges that when done, it can be done, but it does add.
It's really not recommended. It's really not recommended.
No, it's not.
In everything I read, cat and dog waste is not recommended to put.
It is not recommended, but you can compost it. And what we did, or we had a master gardener in Licking County that was doing it, and she actually took one of those plastic bins and kind of buried it and did her composting of her pet waste, but she never used the final product on anything that she would ever come into contact eating. So that was a way, because she was trying to avoid sending that to the landfill. Sure. And so it was able to be composted, but she also made that extra effort to make sure that it wasn't into that anywhere that they were going to grow a garden or anything of that nature that they would come into eating with. So that's a piece there. And yes, Kathy, the compostable garbage bags are not compostable. And same as well with your compostable silverware, the little forks and spoons. They are compostable in certain facilities. That can reach an extremely high temperature for an excessive amount of time. Those are usually like on month cycles that we're finding that those are starting to be able to be broke down. Sometimes it even takes them a couple cycles to do. So even though that they are compostable, they are only in certain situations, and it is extremely challenging for a backyard system to actually meet the requirements for anything that is compostable or labeled compostable.
Question about chicken waste. It's actually not bad for plants. Chicken manure is used very widely in agriculture for fertilizer, and we'll cover more on animal waste in July.
Yep. We're looking forward to that topic. I think it's going to be a good one for just to for everyone to expand their knowledge about composting and in a variety of ways to manage manure a little bit better. All right, oxygen. So this is the second most important piece. And your new friend and tool that you're going to become really good friends with is the pitchfork. If you already have one, great. If not, you need to purchase a manure or a compost fork. And so it has the scooped tine. It's not the pointy tines that you would actually like dig with, but it has like a scooped and a round tines so that it's easier to turn the material. The other items that you'll want to gather around while we're talking about tools is a watering can or hose, buckets for mixing, and your thermometer. The air is just like us. Your bins need to breathe. the microbes need to breathe, and composting is an aerobic or an oxygen requiring process. And so you're mechanically or physically moving or turning it to incorporate that air. And so that's a big piece of that. It also releases the trapped heat. It helps to the moisture and nutrients. It breaks down the stuff and fluffs a little bit more. The next piece is your moisture. So again, your bins need the water. The initial compost pile that you start, the moisture content should be about 50 to 60%. That's a lot more moist than what you probably think it should be. If the pile is too dry, the microbial activity will slow. And if it's too wet, then you're going to fill all of those air pockets that you just did with your pitchfork. And now you're going to have a really hard time keeping your microactivity up. You're gonna zap all your oxygen, and it's going to become a soupy mess. So the wonderful piece is take the hand squeeze test. Take a handful from different places in your compost pile, give them a squeeze. And if a few drops of water should appear between your knuckles, it should feel like a wet sponge wringing out. And that is the best way to monitor your moisture levels in your compost bin. Time, again, it takes time to, if you're adding all of these pieces and doing it, you can really help speed up time. And another way to help speed up time is chopping those big items. So even though chopping is not really required to help, you can throw whole pieces in there, but as the smaller the item, the faster it takes for the material to kind of the microbes and your worms and everything that in that ecosystem to kind of wrap around each of those small pieces. And so it's like thinking about eating an elephant. It would take us forever to eat an elephant, but if we, would disassemble it, then we could eat it in smaller pieces, and we're doing a lot of that effort already. So chop as needed, aim for 2 to 6 inch pieces. Again, these are much larger than what you would think that you could ever put into a worm bin. So you don't have to go to the extremes. And again, you're increasing that surface area to help speed up time. This is also something to think about when you're putting your yard trimmings, your vines, your long sticks in, making sure that they're in, sizable pieces. 6 to 12 inches is probably going to, obviously going to speed up versus something that's much bulkier. So that's, not only for your food, but thinking outside of your food, and your woody type plants matter as well. Your decomposers, this is your workers in your biological, in your system. The decomposers break down the organic waste. We have different levels of compost. We have fungi, bacteria, and our invertebrates. The next one shows the food web. And composting is done by a wide variety of organisms, and they all work together. So the food web, it is just like the circle of life, and it's the food web in your compost pile. The bacteria perform the primary breakdown of the organic material, and then it moves on to the non-bacterial composters, and then your third tier. So they all are much needed. There's some that you can see, some of them that you can't, but without one, the whole system starts to fall apart, and we don't obtain that whole nice composting piece. So even though that systems are made to repurpose materials, it does do some compost management as needed. So making sure that you're always burying any greens that are added, especially food. I know that you are probably tired of us saying that, but this is the #1 rule in composting. Even out in your backyard, you're going to want to make sure that you're burying your food. Again, it will help reduce your odors and reduce your challenges with any pests that might come. And if possible, add a 1/4 inch wire or a floor, which is a hardware cloth, to the bottom of your bin. It will also help to reduce those pesky critters. The wire around your bin also helps keep them out, and you'll have a little bit better chance to manage your compost pile. You're not going to fight with nature, wildlife, I guess. Obtain the proper mix of browns and carbon. Browns are your carbon and green is your nitrogen. You're making sure that you're turning it over, providing that oxygen that is needed for all of your compost life cycle. Organisms, keeping the pile moist but not too wet, and because they all need that moisture, and making sure that your pile reaches the correct temperature to help produce the quality of compost that you're looking for in the desired amount of time. So again, if you're not expecting to get compost for a year and you just want to, start layering it, perfectly fine. Do the cold piece. If you want to go to the extreme, you can do the hot. You can do a middle of the road piece as well. So that's kind of where I ended up being. I had great expectations that, we're going to go out and turn this quite often, and life just didn't happen that way. But thank goodness that we do have a skid steer, so we were able to turn it, fairly frequently. And so I kind of hit the middle of the road piece. So troubleshooting concepts, again, if your compost has a bad odor, check your balance of your browns and greens. Check your moisture levels. Again, adding some browns to help with the excess of water piece. If the pile is damp and warm only in the middle, then your pile is too small. The pile really needs to be a 3 by 3 by 3 bit or a size. In the wintertime, they're actually hoping to expand that to a 5 by 5 by 5, just to allow you to get enough material and a pile big enough to hold the heat in. So you do need to have a big enough pile to maintain your heat as well. And the pile is damp, adding some, but will not heat up. So you're going to add some nitrogen to that. So that's your food mixtures. You can compost in the winter. Just because it gets cold outside doesn't mean that you have to stop composting, but you can slow it all the way down. You can let it winter by itself and not not touch it. You can go out and do it once a week. But you do need to have that size and just to maintain the heat. But you can keep your bin or your pile up to that 150 degree temperature just by composting, incorporating all the steps that we've talked about. The other option or another thing to consider is trying to remove any finished or done compost. So leaving room for your compost pile to be active. Because once you get to that phase where it's done or curing, it's not heating up anymore. So you're going to try to, right before fall, remove any of that cured or compost that needs to be curing from your active pile, so that you're keeping it more on the active or on the the teenage or the infancy stages of your compost and not the end of the cycle. And it also allows it to have enough space for you to add like once a week. This is again an option where you can have your trash barrel kind of as a middle bin in your garage. You can fill it, do a small type of composting in that, and then taking it out to the big heap and incorporating it in. The winter does freeze food particles that are out there, allowing it to speed up its decomposition in the springtime when things start to warm up. So it's a good starter when it starts to move into spring. But you're also going to want to keep your items small so that it's not working as hard if you are actively composting the winter. Layering your compost, making sure that you're doing your layering pieces right. You're not going to have to worry too much about your moisture levels because the snow is going to help with that, unless we turn out to be a very little snow event. And you can insulate. You can, if it gets really, really cold or the forecast is really cold, you can insulate your compost piles, you know, putting a barrier, a fence, a snow fence, or a cloth over it or around it. If you have a tumbler system, they do make compost blankets that you can put around your bin to keep it kind of functioning as well, and, you know, trying to capture any of those sun rays that are possible there. And that's pretty much, you know, just because it gets cold doesn't mean that you do have to stop.
Lindsay, we have a question. How often should you turn your pile? Just in general, I think.
Good question. It's really, your temperatures are gonna help guide you with that, because once it starts to cool off, you can start mixing it to incorporate the air back in. And so it's a kind of finding that happy sweet spot. How much are you adding to it? How are your, like, what is your mix? Is it all organic from the field, or is it home food incorporated? You know, so there's a lot of aspects to that. And then you can really, once it starts to cool off a little bit, that's when you're going to really want to start to adding and mixing it some more. It's not a very great answer, but that's about all I could really find.
Were you done with that last slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you really aren't up to creating a pile in your backyard, you can do some of your yard waste, at least at the Morrow County Yard Waste Facility. It is located at the near the wastewater treatment plant in the backside of the fairgrounds. And so, again, it's open to any county residents or solid waste district residents. The facility accommodates any of the yard waste, so your leaves, grass clippings, trees, shrubs, and branches. It is self-service, so there are no machines there, and we try to discourage commercial use. No trash, no food scraps, no barn or animal waste or household items that can be dropped off. And in the springtime, we haven't mulched it yet, but we collect the material year round. We do mulch it, and you can go get some mulching chips free of charge as well. And again, it's self-serve. The other option is Price Organic Farms. They are in Delaware. It is a little bit of a drive to get there, but they do do residential food scraps composting at that site. There is a small fee, and you can look into that as well if you're interested. But those are, the one is right here in the county, and the other one is just another option within the district that does organic materials.
Price Farms Organics also sells compost and topsoil. They collect all the waste from the zoo, and they compost that and they sell it. It's called Zoo Brew, and it's really, really popular with gardeners. So if you're looking for good compost or good topsoil, Price Organics Farms does have that as well. We did a tour of there last year, and it's a really pretty neat facility.
I did a quick Google search on the turning. The tumblers are, I forgot to mention, and it brought up a good point, that the tumblers are a turning more often because it's a smaller vessel. So it's a smaller everything is in a smaller scale. So you're going to be turning those every day to every other day. And it suggested even turning your big piles 3 to 7 days just to keep that air and oxygen kind of moving. All right, so that is the conclusion of our backyard composting workshop. If you have any more questions, we'll get to those. But thank you for participating in tonight's program. We've really enjoyed this so far. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that composting of animal waste in July. Both Carrie and I had plans to go on vacation in June. So we did take June off. And now that COVID's here, I'm not certain where,
No vacation.
no vacation on my end either, but we will resume back in July because that's what we already scheduled, and we're going to be focusing on those animal waste. I will do some research. There is a solid waste district that I talk frequently with, and their director is big in learning and trying to do the pet compost. So she's writing a book right now, and she has some journals out that she's trying to get some peer reviews and some information and stuff for that side. So I'll try to do some homework as well, and we might be able to address some of that. Just as a quick reminder that if you attend at least 2 of our sessions, you are able to be in the drawing for the compost bins. And they are a variety of bins that we're handing, or that we're going to be giving out. Carrie and I would love to get them out of or at least I would like to get them out of my space. So we are hopefully being able to do a face-to-face meeting in August to learn how to harvest all of our wonderful black gold that we've learned how to create, and you'll get to take it home with you that night. So that is our goal. Hopefully that goal can come to fruition and we can get you off in composting. I know that I've mentioned maybe before that we are, since the schools have been shut down, we do have a research piece put into this component in our workshop series. So if you are interested in vermicomposting or using one of the backyard systems and doing some research, citizen data research for us, let us know, and we will get you in that direction. So hopefully you can do a presentation or give us some information for that August workshop. So again, thank you for all coming, and thanks to the Solid Waste District to helping make a lot of these pieces feasible for us to hand out. And we have some other things up our sleeves that you hopefully will be able to enjoy in regard to composting. And just because we are both, I'm 100% grant funded, and Carrie lives off a lot of university dollars and grant funds and community support as well. We really are required to kind of get your feedback. So if everybody can get their phones out and go to the camera and take a picture, it should pop up a link for you to go to our survey. There are 5 or 6 questions on there, and it really does help us obtain some goals that we have to meet in order to continue our funding piece. And that would be greatly appreciated. If your QR code or your camera is not working, the link is on our website, and I did put that direct link into the chat box, so you can scroll on up and get to the link to go to the website and get to the link for the survey. Again, as a quick reminder, the first and the second workshops are on there, as well as the survey. So if you happen to follow the webinar after, hey, I watched the second one last week, go back and take that survey as well. And again, that really does help Carrie and I reach some of those goals that we are required to do. A lot of the information for the backyard composting I did get from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, U.S. Composting Council, OSU Extension fact sheets, and the Hamilton County Recycling Solid Waste District composting guide. And so you can look into some of those resources. There's all kinds of animations of how to build, like, if you can put in where you'd like to put your compost pile, and there's lots of great information out there. But I found that just compiled all the information hopefully for you, provided a good snapshot of how to do backyard composting.
Excellent. All right, I think that's all we have for tonight. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and like Lindsay said, check back with us here in July, and we'll talk about animal waste composting.
And in the survey, there's the last question is for your guys' ideas. So make sure that you're giving us other ideas. Both of us, build off of community support and basically value your guys' ideas. So hopefully you can give us those types of things as well. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.